I came home to 4 strangers eating cereal at my kitchen table like they owned the place. A dad in a windbreaker said, "Ah, you're the host?" in a cheerful accent, and the little kid waved the spoon he just used to stir my coffee mug. My coffee mug. The blue one with the chip on the handle. My lease says I live alone. My brain did that thing where it flips through all explanations at once. Wrong door, prank, wrong day, I'm dreaming, before landing on the only one that made sense. Somebody had been renting out my apartment behind my back. The dad looked confused by my silence and pointed toward the hallway. The key was in the lockbox. The code worked great. I didn't have a lockbox. I didn't have a code. When I finally found my voice, it came out thin. "Where did you get that code?" 2 hours earlier, I was supposed to be starting a night shift. I'm a nurse, which means my schedule is a messy Jenga tower that collapses whenever someone calls in. Someone did, the tower fell, and I got a surprise night off. I texted my boyfriend that I might crash early and stop by his place tomorrow. He texted back a thumbs up and a good for you, which should have felt normal. Instead, as I stood in the doorway watching a stranger's kid drip milk onto my floor, I heard the echo of all the little weirds from the past month. My comforter folded wrong, a lemon missing from the bowl, the faint smell of someone else's shampoo in my shower. I had gaslit myself about all of it because work has me stretched paper thin. But the cereal kid, with milk on his chin, blinking at me in my own kitchen like he belonged here, that was not something my brain could file under tired. "Sorry," the dad said, switching to careful, slow English like I was the confused tourist. "We booked this place for 2 nights? The listing shows your living room." He turned his phone around and there it was. My rug, my couch, my lopsided plant, my thrift store bookshelf. My exact living room, filtered and bright, with a caption I will never forget: "Charming downtown retreat, hosted by Matt. Flexible check-ins, private space, quiet building. Matt is my landlord." I wish I could tell you I flipped the table. I wish I could tell you I called the police and they rocket launched through the wall and arrested everyone including the milk. What I did was stand there, gripping my tote bag until the canvas bit into my palm, and ask the dad if he would please gather his family while I made a phone call. The mom, who had the universal look of someone who just wants a nap, touched my elbow and said, "We're so sorry. We didn't know." She didn't? I believed that instantly. She was in sweatpants. Real criminals don't wear sweatpants to crimes. I stepped into the hall and dialed Matt. No answer. Dialed again. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "Matt, there are strangers eating cereal in my kitchen. Did you list my apartment?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. "What do you mean?" he finally wrote. "Stop being dramatic. I'll be there in 10. 10 minutes to figure out whether I was going to be the calm, reasonable tenant who documents everything or the feral raccoon who bites a landlord on sight and asks for a deposit refund later. I chose both. I photographed the lock. There was a fresh lockbox hanging below my doorknob, one of those black mini safes, tucked behind the pipe like a barnacle. I'd never seen it. I lifted it and felt the weight of something metallic inside. The housing authority pamphlets talk about illegal short-term rentals, like a storm you might see on TV, not like a wave that slides under your own front door, past your bed, and curls up around the mug your sister gave you for graduation. The family hovered near the door with their luggage like nervous deer. "We can go to a cafe and come back," the mom offered. "We don't want trouble." I could hear the panic she wasn't trying to show the kids, and I almost told them to stay because it felt cruel to push them out into the cold with that guilt on their faces. But I needed them not in my living room when Matt arrived. I wanted no blurred lines. "There's a coffee shop on the corner," I said. "Can you give me 20? The dad nodded, apologized again, and shepherded everyone out. The little boy waved at me like maybe we could be friends. The lock clicked, and I was alone with the kind of silence that isn't quiet at all. I went room to room like a stranger in a museum of my own life, touching nothing, seeing everything. The hairbrush moved 3 inches, the hand towel folded like a hotel, the extra blanket gone from the hall closet. There was a folded piece of paper on my desk that I didn't leave there. A printed itinerary with the check-in time, the Wi-Fi password, and a line that made my stomach drop. "Please be respectful of the tenant's belongings." The elevator dinged. I braced for a fight and got a shrug-in human form in a North Face vest. Matt walked in like he was checking on a leak. "Hey," he said. "What's the problem?" The part of me that wants everyone to like me had about 3 seconds to try and take the wheel. I locked her in the glove compartment. "The problem," I said steady, is you listed my home as a hotel without asking permission and strangers were eating from my dishes. His eyebrow did that landlord thing where it climbs all the way into a different tax bracket. Calm down, he said, palms up. It's not like that. He took out his phone, scrolled, and held up a screen with the listing page. He must have thought if he showed it to me, it would become real on his terms. I own the unit, he said, quiet voice, reasonable voice. It's completely legal for me to host guests when you're not home. I schedule it only on certain nights. You're on nights most weeks, right? They come late, they leave early, you probably never even notice. My mouth went dry. I noticed. He sighed like I was a stubborn child. Look, rent's barely covering costs right now. I gotta be creative. You weren't here tonight. No harm done. That sentence snapped something in me so cleanly I could hear it. There was a child in my kitchen, I said slowly, and my lease says exclusive possession. That means it's my home. You don't get to invite people into my home when I'm not in it. His jaw tightened. There was the flash of real. You want to make this ugly? We can make it ugly. He jerked his chin toward the lockbox. Give me that. No, I said, and I put my hand on it. We stood there like two kids on opposite ends of a tug-of-war rope. Then Matt did what cowards do. He backed up a step, the smile snapped back on like a mask, and he said, we can talk about this downstairs. I'm not going anywhere with you. The guests will be back any minute. Either you cancel their booking and return their money, or we're calling the police. And I'm documenting everything. He spread his hands again, but I saw the tension in attendance. You don't want cops here, he said. It's bad for the building. Bad for you. I'm good with bad for me, I said and pulled my phone out. He watched me dial like he was watching the last $5 in his wallet fly out a window. The strangest thing is how calm my voice sounded when the dispatcher picked up. Hi. Yes. My landlord rented my apartment to strangers. They're coming back from a coffee shop, but I did not consent. I'm requesting an officer. Matt didn't leave. He leaned against the door with his arms crossed, like bouncers do when they want you to see the arms. You work nights, right? He said casually. Nurses are never home. It's basically a house-sitting gig for me. Win-win. I laughed. It came out like a bark. Win-win for who? You can hardly afford this place on your own, he said, and that, somehow, was the ugliest sentence of the night. Not because it wasn't true, hello medical loans, but because he said it like a kindness. Like he deserved a thank you for stealing my hours. The police arrived before the family did, which was a small mercy. The officers were polite and professional, and they did that careful dance between, this is clearly messed up, and we will only say the word illegal if a statute falls out of the ceiling and hits us in the face. One of them looked at the lockbox, looked at the listing on my phone, and said to Matt, you can't enter a tenant's unit without notice, sir, except in an emergency. You know that. Matt's face did math. The dad and his family came back in, saw the uniforms, and went pale. My heart broke for them like it had anything left to break. It's not your fault, I told the mom, and she started crying, silent tears, mortified. The officers told Matt to cancel and refund. He grumbled and tapped. The dad kept apologizing to me in the kind of whisper that is more scream than anything. We never would have come, he said, if we had known. When they left, the apartment was suddenly too big and too small at once. Matt lingered in the hall just long enough to hiss, you made a mistake. Then he took the lockbox with him like he was not just stealing metal but a whole idea of control. The door closed. The quiet came back. I stood in my kitchen, touched the chipped mug, and finally let my hands shake. I texted my boyfriend what happened. He sent, WTF? Are you safe? Call me. The phone rang while the adrenaline was still in my teeth. I answered, sat on my floor, and told him everything. When I got to the part where Matt said, win-win, my boyfriend swore so hard he invented new syllables. Then he said the one sentence I needed, you're not crazy. I barely slept. Every creak sounded like a suitcase. At 3 a.m. I got up and walked through my place again, a ritual I never had before and had to have now. The hall closet door had a small black smudge on the inside knob. I wiped it with a tissue and stared at the gray streak it left, weirdly triumphant, like I'd solved a puzzle with a stain. In the morning, I emailed Matt what the officers had said and asked for confirmation in writing that he would cease all short-term rentals immediately. He replied with one line, we'll discuss at the end of the month. I replied with the lease clause about exclusive possession and quiet enjoyment, attaching a photo of the lockbox. He replied, "Stop harassing me." That's when the part of my brain that is made of checklists woke up. I started a timeline in a notes app. I printed screenshots. I called the city's tenant hotline. I filed a complaint. I bought a tiny dumb motion detector that dings if the door opens. I changed my deadbolt. I texted my downstairs neighbor to ask if she'd noticed extra foot traffic. She wrote back immediately, "OMG yes. Rolling suitcases at 11 p.m. Thought you had family visiting?" I said I didn't and asked for dates. She gave me 3. My notes app liked that. My heartbeat liked that a little less. 2 days later, a new review appeared on the listing. Great location, clean place, easy check-in. 5 stars. Date stamped the 2 nights I'd been at work the week before. The cover photo was my living room. The second photo was my kitchen. The third photo was my bedroom. I know because you could see the corner of the quilt my grandmother made, the one with the tiny blue stitches like raindrops. My stomach rolled like an elevator. I clicked the host's profile. Matt had 7 other cozy units. All in my building. All with photos that looked very, very lived in. I didn't feel brave. I felt like a person underwater who finally kicks hard enough to break the surface and sees how far from shore she really is. If this were a movie, the next scene would be a dramatic montage. Me at a copier, me under a fluorescent light in a windowless city office. Me saying words like statute and violation and abatement with a confident hair flip. Real life. I called the tenant hotline 3 times because I kept forgetting the right questions. The woman on the phone was patient in the way that makes you want to cry. She said I was doing the right things. She gave me a list of agencies. She said words like document, complaint, inspection. She said, "Do not let him retaliate." I didn't tell my mom. She worries too much, the kind that ends in prayers and extra soup. I didn't tell most of my friends. The last time I told them a landlord story, one said, "Well, that's city life," and I wanted to throw my city life into the river. I told my boyfriend because I could hear him getting angrier with me, not at me, if that makes sense. He said he was coming over. I said no because I needed to be alone to make a plan. He said he would wait to be useful. That mattered. I took a personal day I couldn't afford. I sat at my desk and tried to be the version of myself who shows up to 12-hour shifts and remembers to eat. First step, find the listing without logging in. I used a browser I never use, found Matt's page, and hit save on every screen like I was trying to yank the internet into my apartment and nail it to the wall. Second step, email the platform. The form asked if I was the host, a guest, or other. I clicked other. It asked for the reservation number. I typed, "I am the tenant. My landlord is illegally listing my occupied home without consent." Third step, city complaint. The online form crashed twice. On the third try it stuck. There was a field for it, described the issue, and I wrote more than anyone has ever written in a form field ever. I hit submit with a little vengeance flourish and then immediately worried I hadn't been clear. At noon my downstairs neighbor knocked. She brought coffee and intel. She said she'd seen a young couple with a backpack and a rolling suitcase 2 nights ago. She'd heard Matt in the hallway at midnight whispering, "Shoo shoo." She asked if I wanted her to write it down. I did. She asked if she should text me when she heard wheels in the hallway. I said yes, and then we both laughed at how dystopian that sentence sounded. At 2 p.m. the platform emailed back. "We take these reports seriously," it said in that tone of voice that is both soothing and made of cardboard. "We will reach out to the host to clarify the listing status." I pictured Matt typing, "The tenant is aware," and the platform replying with a thumbs up. I submitted the same complaint again, but with more screenshots and less hope. At 4 p.m. the building group chat lit up. Someone on the 5th floor wrote, "Anyone know why there's a lockbox on 3B? Someone else wrote, "Oh, what lockbox, welcome to the hotel." I sat very still and read every message twice. I typed, deleted, typed again. I didn't want to tip Matt off that I was the one rattling his cage. I also didn't want to be silent. I wrote, "FYI, I live in 3B. Lockbox was not authorized by me. If you see guests trying to access, please direct them to the landlord." Sent. My heart thudded against my sternum like a polite bongo. At 6 p.m., my phone dinged with a calendar reminder I forgot I set, "Change deadbolt." I held the new deadbolt like a trophy when I got back from the hardware store. The guy behind the counter had said, "This one's good for people who want their landlord to be mad," and I said, "Perfect." I also bought a tiny door wedge alarm because the words tiny door wedge alarm are what my anxiety needed to hear. I had just finished swapping the deadbolt when the motion detector dinged. 1 ding means the door moved. 2 means the door opened. I got 2 dings. My body did not ask my permission before it sprinted toward the door. I looked through the peephole and saw Matt's face inches from mine, distorted by the fisheye so he looked like a Picasso painting of a problem. He jiggled the handle, then stopped. The wedge alarm was in my pocket. I had not put it down yet. He knocked. I didn't open the door. What? I asked. You changed the lock, he said through the wood, injured authority in his voice. I did, I replied. Because strangers have been inside my home. You can't change the locks without giving me a key. You can't rent my apartment like a hotel, I said back, and my voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. The motion detector blinked like a tiny, dumb lighthouse on the shelf. He took a breath. We need to talk. We're talking. You're being unreasonable. I am being very reasonable while my adrenaline is trying to audition for a drum line. Silence. Then, you're in violation of your lease. Okay, I said, let's read it together. I pulled my copy, flipped to the page the way you flip to a page you've been staring at for 2 days, and read the clause out loud through the door. Landlord shall not disturb the tenant's quiet enjoyment or enter the premises without proper notice except in emergency. Tenant shall have exclusive possession of the premises. I paused. Do you hear the words I'm reading, Matt, or do you want to keep pretending reading is optional? Another silence. Then footsteps away from my door, then footsteps back like he'd realized walking away would look like losing. We're terminating your lease at end of term, he said low. Cool, I said, because my anger had grown confident enough to be sarcastic. Put it in writing. I heard paper rustle. He slid a letter under the door. It said in very bold font that my lease would not be renewed. It also said that any harassment of building management would be grounds for immediate action. I took a picture of the letter, saved it, and emailed it to myself with the subject retaliation. At 8 p.m. my boyfriend called again. I'm coming over, he said. We can put your stuff in my place for a few days. I let pride keep my mouth shut for 2 beats and then said, yes. Bring boxes. When he arrived, he did that thing where he looks around a space he knows well and sees it differently because of what you've told him. He put his palms on my cheeks and said, I hate that you felt unsafe in here. Then he packed like a man in a movie montage. I packed like a squirrel. We labeled everything. We took the quilt last. 2 days later, the city inspector called. He'd come by the building. He'd talked to other tenants. He'd seen the lockboxes, plural. He said, we're issuing a notice to the owner. He didn't sound like cardboard. He sounded like a person who had knocked on many doors and seen many lockboxes and was tired of all of it. He told me to keep documenting. He told me not to move until I had what I needed. He did not tell me what would happen next, which felt like honesty. That afternoon, the platform finally responded again. We have temporarily suspended the host's listings pending verification. Temporarily. Pending. I printed it anyway and stapled it to my growing stack with a triumphant little thunk. At night, the hallway still sounded like wheels even when it didn't. I would be halfway to sleep and then bolt upright, convinced a family of 6 was having granola in my kitchen. I started sleeping at my boyfriend's mostly, coming back in daylight to get the rest of my things and to wait for the inspector when he scheduled a follow-up. My downstairs neighbor texted that she hadn't heard suitcases in 2 nights. Maybe it worked, she wrote, question mark heavier than the words. It should have felt like progress. It felt like standing on a rug you know someone has already yanked out once, waiting for the second yank. My boyfriend said, come stay with me full-time until this is done. I told him I didn't want to abandon my apartment, as if an apartment is a cat you can leave alone with food and hope it forgives you later. It's not abandoning, he said gently. It's choosing not to sleep in a place that makes your nervous system sound like a car alarm. On the 3rd day, a new message popped up in my building group chat from a number I didn't recognize. Does anyone know how to access 3B? Our code isn't working. I screenshotted so fast my phone almost combusted. Before I could type, my downstairs neighbor replied, there is no code, there is no lockbox, and if you are trying to check into someone else's home you should leave. I wanted to knit her a sweater. I wanted to blast her text onto the moon. 2 minutes later, Matt texted me, stop causing problems. I told them the booking was canceled. I typed, Stop making my home your side gig. He didn't write back. If the universe were kind, this is where the story would wind down. An inspector, a suspension, a boyfriend with boxes, a building that peered over the edge and stepped back. But a universe that contains greedy men in North Face vests is not a kind one by default. The next twist came not from a knock at the door or a platform email, but from a DM on Instagram of all places. A message request from a profile named Anna Travels. Hi, it said, we stayed in your apartment last month. I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was yours until I recognized your quilt on your sister's feed. Attached were 3 photos. My living room with a different rug. Matt had staged it, I realized, by pulling up the rolled rug from the hall closet, the one I thought I'd misplaced. My bathroom counter with someone's travel toiletry kit politely lined up next to my toothbrush holder, and a selfie of a 20-something couple on my balcony at sunset, smiling like people who had no reason not to. Do you remember what dates? I replied, hands shaking for a new reason now. She did. They matched the nights I'd been floating on 4 hours of sleep, telling myself I was paranoid about the smell of someone else's perfume on my towel. She wrote, when we checked in there were 2 mugs in the sink. I thought the host was just messy. He told us to make ourselves at home, the tenant never notices. We thought he meant the next-door neighbor. I am so sorry. I stared at those words until they bled into each other. Then I screenshotted them and added them to my stack. I don't know when exactly my anger stopped being a live wire and became a tool, but I felt the shift the morning I walked into the city office with my folder, thick enough to be a mediocre pillow, and saw the inspector's eyes light with recognition. He waved me in, shook my hand, and said, "You brought the file." It made me laugh, which was surprising and nice. I handed him everything. The photos, the screenshots, the platform's cardboard, the building chat, the Instagram DMs, the letter Matt slid under my door. He read quietly for a long time. When he finally looked up, he said one thing I hadn't let myself hope for: this is sufficient. In the hallway outside, I ran into 2 tenants from the 5th floor holding identical folders. We all did that human thing where you smile in the shared misfortune way, not the happy way. 3B, one of them asked. I nodded. Us too, they said. Lockbox came down yesterday, went up again this morning. We compared notes like detectives. We agreed to share updates. We said, this building, like a prayer and a curse. Back at my boyfriend's, I tried to nap, failed, got up, and cleaned his kitchen like I was fighting it. He let me. He understands that sometimes the only thing between you and screaming is a sponge. When I finally sat, he slid tea across the table and said, "What do you want at the end of this?" It was such a simple question that it felt radical. I answered without thinking, to not have to look at my own couch and feel watched. He nodded like that was an achievable miracle. 3 days later, the notice went up in the lobby: short-term rental activity is prohibited. Violations subject to fines. It was beige paper with black letters like every tedious notice you never read. I read it like it was a love letter. My downstairs neighbor texted me a photo of it and 10 exclamation points. The platform followed with a real person email: we have removed the host's listings for violating platform policy regarding tenant-occupied units. We apologize for any distress. I printed it and did the triumphant staple again. My stack was becoming a book. If you shook it, little pellets of spite would fall out. Matt did not text. Matt did not call. Matt did, however, post a notice on my door saying I was in violation for changing the locks. The notice said I had to provide a copy of my new key within 24 hours. I did, taped to a letter that said, as per the lease, you can enter only with 24 hours written notice or in emergencies. All future entries will be recorded. The word recorded was doing a lot of work in that sentence, and it deserved a raise. The city fine came the following week. Someone in the building group chat posted a blurry photo of it on a clipboard, and the comments were a small party. I imagine Matt seeing it and doing that landlord math face again. How many 5-star stays equals 1 fine? What's the win-win now? My boyfriend poured cheap champagne into mismatched mugs, and we toasted to beige paper and black letters. You'd think this is where I triumphantly move all the way out or all the way back in, slam a door in a cinematic way, and roll credits. But the ending of this kind of story is twofold, and both are boring and necessary: paperwork and boundaries. I gave my official 30-day notice, citing constructive interference with quiet enjoyment and attaching the stack. I asked for my full deposit back and a rent credit for the days my home was a lobby. Matt replied through a lawyer with 3 paragraphs of everything is fine, we did nothing wrong. I replied through a tenants' rights clinic with 4 paragraphs of okay, but here are pictures of a stranger's toothbrush next to mine. We went back and forth until the math worked out close enough to fair that my lawyer friend texted, "Take it and spend the stress savings on something nice." On my second to last day, I came back to 3B alone to pack the last of the kitchen. The silence was different. Less holding its breath, more just quiet. I ran my hand along the chipped mug. I took the plant that never quite recovered from winter. I left the cheap spice rack because it didn't deserve a new home. I stood in the living room and said out loud, because I'm a weirdo, "I'm sorry." To the space? To myself? Both. I locked the door and did not feel like the rug was about to get yanked. In the elevator, I ran into the family with the windbreaker, my mind stuck on them even though they were just a symbol. I wondered if they'd find somewhere else, if they'd ever tell anyone what happened, if the dad would ever hold up a phone in a stranger's kitchen again. At my boyfriend's, I put the quilt on his couch. It changed the room. It changed me a little too. That night we ate takeout on the floor and I told him about the first time I ever signed a lease. How grown up I felt. How small I feel now and how big, both at once. He said, "That's what boundaries feel like." He meant the good kind, not the kind with lockboxes. A week later, Anna from Instagram messaged me again. "We filed a report with the platform too," she said. "We didn't want you to be alone." Then she sent a final photo I'd missed the first time. A shot from my balcony of the building across the street, windows like little eyes. The sunset was pink in a way that only happens when the air is slightly dirty and the day's heat has nothing left to do but leak color. It looked nice. My balcony. My view. Mine and not mine anymore. I kept thinking about the sentence Matt said the first night, "You probably never even notice." How there are whole economies based on the assumption that you won't notice, or if you do, you'll be too tired to fight about it. Nurses who work nights. Tenants who can't afford to move. People who say, "I don't want to cause trouble," because they were raised to leave the world cleaner than they found it and assume everyone else was too. I kept thinking about the kid with milk on his chin, wide-eyed, unbothered, like the world was a hotel and we were all just guests. So here's what I learned, for anyone who needs the end of this to be more than my anger turned into a filing system. You are not paranoid because you notice your lemon is missing. Your weird sense that someone's been in your space is a sense. Your lease is not a poem. The lock on your door is not a suggestion. The quiet you are owed is not a luxury item. And if someone tells you it's a win-win while standing in the kitchen you pay for, they are not offering you a deal. They are offering you a story where they are the main character and you are set dressing. I did move. The new place is smaller and the walls are thinner, but when I lock the door, the click sounds like mine. We hung the quilt. My boyfriend built a wobbly bookshelf and we laughed and then unwobbled it. The first morning there, I made coffee in my chipped blue mug and stood by the window watching a dog pull its owner down the street with the full-body commitment of someone who knows exactly where it's going. I felt, finally, the absence of wheels in a hallway that wasn't mine anymore. It felt like a bell stopping. And because the internet always wants to know what happened to the villain, Matt's listings are still down. 2 tenants from my old building told me he's considering long-term rentals again, as if they're a hot new concept. The lockboxes came off for now. The beige notice is still up, curling at the corners in the August humidity. I don't know what the building will be in 6 months. I do know that more people have folders now. More people have stacks. If you read this far, thank you for lending me your attention long enough to tip the scales in my own head. If this happened to you, I hope you get your beige paper with black letters and you're quiet. If you think it can't happen to you, check your door. Check your lemon. Check the way your towel is folded and ask yourself if you're the one who did that. Ask your building chat about wheels. Ask your landlord for the keys they have. Ask for your quiet in writing. And if you've got thoughts, I'd love to hear them. What would you have done differently? What do you think I should have done next? Drop a comment, hit like if you want more true stories like this, and share this with someone who needs the reminder. Your home is yours.